How's it going, everyone? This is Mike. Welcome back. I'm ready to start my top 100 favorite films list, and this time I'm going to be doing 20 films. And I want to make it clear again that this is not supposed to be a best films of all time list, but just my own personal favorites. And this serves as kind of an overview of my taste in movies. It's kind of all over the place and gives you an idea of the things that I like. Okay? All right. Starting off with number 100, this is a Hollywood classic from 1936, The Petrified Forest. Wonderful drama directed by Archie Mayo, a director I'm not terribly familiar with, starring Leslie Howard, Bette Davis, and Humphrey Bogart. It's about a group of people at an isolated gas station cafe out in the desert, and the people there are held hostage by an escaped murderer named Duke Mantee, played by Humphrey Bogart, who is fashioning his portrayal after John Dillinger, the real-life John Dillinger. And this is a fascinating film. Great work by Leslie Howard. Great opportunity for Bette Davis, who was getting a lot of low-budget B films at the time. She was not terribly happy, so she was very glad to get this film. Humphrey Bogart had worked with Leslie Howard in the stage play, The Petrified Forest. And when it came time for it to be made into a film by Warner Brothers, the studio wanted to replace Bogart with Edward G. Robinson, and Leslie Howard told the studio that he would not be in the film if they did not use Humphrey Bogart. So gave Humphrey Bogart one of his first great roles, which eventually started him on his way to being a major star in the early 1940s. And Bogart was so grateful to Leslie Howard for what he did for him that when his first child was born, a girl, he and Lauren Bacall named her Leslie Howard Bogart. So, I mean, great film you need to see. The next up is a wonderful English film from 1967 called Far from the Madding Crowd, starring Julie Christie, Terence Stamp, Peter Finch, Alan Bates, directed by John Schlesinger. Beautiful cinematography by Nicholas Roeg. I had never seen this movie before, and I had seen the remake a couple of years ago and really liked it, but it made me curious about the original, so I happened to go out and find a cheap $5 copy here, used copy, and I like it much more than the original. Julie Christie is just entrancing. Just beautiful. And the cinematography, the locations in that part of Britain, Dorset, just incredible, and I can't say too many good things about it. I've never read the book by Thomas Hardy. I need to do that. The next film is one that I do not own. This is a film that came out in 2018. It's called Roma, and it was made by Netflix, so you can see it on Netflix, those of you who have it, which I don't. But it was also released in theaters on a sort of limited basis, so I had a chance to see it a few months ago. It's absolutely beautiful. It takes place in the early 1970s in Mexico City. Roma is an area of Mexico City, and it focuses on this middle-class family living in this huge house, husband, wife, 4 small children, and their lives, and also the life of their maid, who really is the central character in the film. Her name is Cleo, and she is played by a woman who had never been an actress before. Her name is Yalitza Aparicio, and she is absolutely wonderful and heartbreaking. It is a beautiful, beautiful film, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, who also directed the film Gravity. And I just can't say too many good things about it. It's also in black and white. But look forward to this film Roma being mentioned when all the awards start coming out, because I think it's going to be a major player in the Academy Awards, and it should be. Okay. Next up is a great horror film from 2015, The Witch. It crams so much atmosphere into this beautiful, beautiful film. I don't know how they managed to do it. It's almost overwhelming. It's a different take on witchcraft, and one of the main players in the film is the goat that you see on the cover here. He probably should have been nominated for an Oscar. The actors and actresses in this film are people that I was not familiar with at the time, and I'm still not, but it's just beautiful. It takes place in 17th century New England. Very religious people who are living as homesteaders and trying to survive in the wilderness. And when things start to go wrong, they start to sort of turn in on each other and suspect other people of practicing witchcraft. And that's how it all starts. It gets very psychological, and it's pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing film. The next one is a film that I also do not own. This is called Another Earth, a film that was made in 2011. It's a science fiction film mixed with a very human drama. It's a very good story, very unique, very original. And there's an actress named Britt Marling who stars as a young woman named Rhoda. At the beginning of the film, she's a 17-year-old girl who is she's about to start a terrific new life. She's gotten a scholarship to, I think it's MIT, and she's out drinking with some friends. She drinks too much, makes the mistake of driving when she's drunk. Never a good idea. While she's driving home, she's hearing on the radio a news report about a mysterious planet which is beginning to appear in the sky, visible to people on Earth. And they're not sure what this planet is. So while she's driving and she's loaded and she's not paying attention, she's looking up at the stars of this planet. And she crashes into a car at a stoplight, and she kills a woman, her unborn child, and her little boy. And the father of the family is put into a coma. He's the only one who survives. So the young girl goes away to prison for a few years. When she comes back, she tries to build her life again. She finds herself getting involved with this man who is a widower. And meanwhile, the planet is becoming more and more visible, and scientists are learning more and more about it. And they find that it is exactly like Earth, not only in the topography, but also they're finding out that there is a duplicate of every person on Earth on this planet. So that it takes you in some very strange directions, and it's really fascinating. I loved it. I saw it when it first came out. And like I said, I don't own it, but I also saw it in one of my recent film classes, and I was very happy to see it again. Next up is the John Cassavetes classic, Shadows. The first film that he made, he actually started making the film in 1957 and worked on it for the next few years, and it was finally released again. I believe there are different dates, 59, 1960, but it started out with John Cassavetes' own acting class. He had an acting workshop in the 1950s, and he has his little group of studio actors. It's kind of like the Actors Studio, but a group of people that he always worked with and did improvisations. He made this interesting little film about a very artistic, disparate group of people living in New York City in the late 1950s, and it focuses on a family, an African-American family, where there's a man who is very dark-skinned, and he has a younger sister and brother who are very light-skinned and are able to pass for white. And it shows what happens to these people when they just live their lives in the direction that they find themselves going in. The whole thing about race is never really discussed. You just see it playing out before you in the actions between all the characters. It's really wonderful, and a lot of good music too. Some of it by Charles Mingus, the great jazz player, saxophone player. It started off John Cassavetes' great career as a director. He's considered to be one of the leading, sort of like the beginning of the underground film movement in the United States. Okay. Next up is Witness for the Prosecution, directed by Billy Wilder in 1957. Great cast of actors: Tyrone Power, Marlene Dietrich, Charles Lawton, Elsa Lanchester. Based on an Agatha Christie novel and play. Lawton plays a lawyer who is recovering from a heart attack, and he's supposed to be taking it easy, right? But he gets involved with a murder case. Tyrone Power has been accused of murdering a woman who was quite a bit older than he was and giving him a lot of money, so he's got kind of a bad rap as being a gigolo. And Charles Lawton is mystified by what's going on in the story, and he just keeps delving further and further. And it's a fascinating court case, fascinating dialogue between the characters, especially between Lawton and Elsa Lanchester, his wife in real life, who was playing the nurse who was supposed to be taking care of him and watching over him every minute. Fascinating film. Okay, next up is Lois Spoonwell's The Exterminating Angel from 1962, a Mexican film. I don't know where to start with this. It's fascinating, it's funny, it's strange, it's a little bit scary. It's all about a group of very well-to-do, high society people in Mexico who go to a beautiful house one night for dinner, and they are unable to leave. They simply cannot leave the house, and they stay there for weeks until they're all beginning to starve. And it's kind of a metaphor for the breakdown of an ordered society, society going into chaos. It's a fascinating film, and it's one that you need to watch many, many times, or at least I do, in order to really start to get everything that it's trying to show you. Next up is one of my favorite guilty pleasures. Who else but me would follow a Spoonwell film with a Ray Dennis Steckler film, The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies, the longest film title in history, I think. 1963, Ray Dennis Steckler made this bizarre little horror film, which is called the first monster musical, because he somehow got a hold of this group of dancing girls and musicians and made it into a musical. I mean, between all the strange killings and I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but I can watch this again and again, and I do, and I enjoy it every time. Great cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond, Laszlo Kovacs, who were starting out. I think this may have been one of their first films that they did. That's how they got started in Hollywood, by working with Ray Dennis Steckler. So I love this movie a lot. Next up is The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, directed by James Whale. Boris Karloff comes back to play the monster. He's joined by Elsa Lanchester as his bride. A lot of people think this movie is better than the original Frankenstein. I think they're pretty much comparable. I really enjoy this, and it's one that you never get tired of watching. Okay. Next up is Clark Gable and Jean Harlow in Red Dust, 1932. Now, I picked this one because in the last year, I fell completely in love with Jean Harlow. I never had seen that many of her films, but I started sort of acquiring them from oldies.com and just really fell in love with her. And I happened to see this in one of my film classes, so I got a copy of my own to watch at home. And this is kind of an overview of what the Harlow character was. She's a beautiful prostitute with a heart of gold. Great chemistry between her and Clark Gable. They made a lot of films together, by the way. This is probably one of the best, and it's just delightful from start to finish. Okay, also has Gene Raymond and Mary Astor, directed by Victor Fleming, who ended up doing The Wizard of Oz. Okay, next up is Fellini's 8½, his masterpiece, 138 minutes long. The original cut was something like 4 hours. Marcello Mastroianni plays a film director who is going through a crisis not only in his career but in his life. He is besieged by all the people around him who are trying to get him to finish this science fiction film that he's blocked. He can't think of how to finish it. And he has a beautiful wife played by Anouk Ami. He cannot be faithful to her. She knows it. She's suffering. He has a mistress played by Sandra Milo who will not leave him alone. He can't stay away from her. He finds himself going into fantasies when he's having a nervous breakdown. He's trying to recover by going to this spa out in the country, and he's still, even though he's supposed to be resting, he can't get away from all the people who are trying to get something from him, including a lot of women who keep flirting with him. And Barbara Steele happens to be one of them, one of her best films. Okay, next up is a recent film called Leave No Trace, which is another one that, I don't know, I was so impressed by this that I had to put it on my list of top 100 films. The lead actor is Ben Foster, and the young actress who plays his daughter, Thomasin Harcourt McKenzie. It's about a man who is suffering from PTSD from being in the war, one of our wars, and he is living off the grid with his young daughter who's a teenager. He just cannot live in society, and they live out in the woods. It's around Portland, Oregon. Well, they get found out, and because she's a young kid, a minor, they get swept up into the social system, and they find a place for them to live, a real house. They find him a job. They put her in school. She finds it easy to begin to adjust to a normal kind of life, but her father can't, so they end up leaving again. And it gets very dramatic. It's beautiful to look at, and it's a very quiet film, really, but fascinating character study of these two people. Okay, very, very worthwhile. All right, next up is Stanley Kubrick's classic film noir and caper film, The Killing, from 1956, I believe it is, 55, 56. Sterling Hayden, Colleen Gray, Marie Windsor. We have Elisha Cook Jr. This is a fascinating film. This could be a great companion piece to The Asphalt Jungle, which is another great film noir caper film, which probably should be on my list here, but it's not for no particular reason. But it's a great film too, which Sterling Hayden also happens to be in. But it would be a good comparison to watch these together. Beautifully written and orchestrated caper film showing step by step what they plan to rob this racetrack, and they have everything planned right down to each minute, each person doing their job, and of course everything that can possibly go wrong does, and it has an incredible ending, really. So good example of the early Kubrick. All right, next up we have this wonderful film from 1961 called Something Wild, starring Carol Baker, Ralph Meeker, and Mildred Dunnock, who plays Carol Baker's mother. Directed by a guy named Jack Garfein, who happened to be married to Carol Baker at the time, and he was primarily a director of the theater, but he did a handful of films, all of them very interesting. And this one has to do with a young woman who, at the beginning of the film, she's a college student, and she's walking home one night, and she gets raped. She gets pulled into some secluded area of a park, and she gets raped, and it shows the aftermath, what happens to her. It's actually very hard to watch in a lot of places. She tries to, without telling anybody what happened, she tries to go back to having the life that she was already living, but she finds that she can't. One day she's sitting on a park bench with her school books next to her, and she just suddenly gets up and walks away from her books and from her entire life, her entire existence as she's known it, and goes off to another part of the city and completely becomes a different person. And it takes her into some incredible directions. And as I said, it's not easy to watch what happens to her, but it's fascinating, and good performance by Carol Baker, and very, very good performance by Ralph Meeker. It's also in black and white, great music, great cinematography, so it's definitely worth seeing, and it's out on Criterion. All right. Next up is a film in this box set, Forbidden Hollywood, Volume 3. This is the only one of these that I have. And the film I'm talking about is from 1933. It's called Wild Boys of the Road. Now, all of these films in this box set happen to be directed by the great director William Wellman. And Wild Boys of the Road is a very timely story for that Depression era, when a lot of children were leaving their families because they went out to look for work. They were thrown into a life of riding the rails and trying to go to big cities to look for work and doing anything they can just to find food and hopefully someday bring back money for their families. And the film stars Frankie Darro, who was a very up-and-coming young actor of the time. He had been started out as a kid actor way back in silent films, and I became a major Frankie Darro fan last year. I just kind of discovered him, and I bought a lot of his films, and he does a very, very good job in this. It's a very bleak story, and originally they had a very negative, very sad ending to it, and William Wellman decided to change the ending to positive because he thought it would break people's hearts if they were to see a sad ending to something that was so real, so true to their own lives. So he gave them a beautiful ending as a sign of hope. Next up is Roman Polanski's classic homage to film noir, Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway, and John Huston. A truly sordid, creepy story done in such a beautiful framework that you just can't, you can't get enough of watching this. It's so beautiful to look at. The music is beautiful. Great performances by everyone concerned. John Huston is very good in this, even though, Roman Polanski, I would say this is probably his masterpiece, in my opinion. Okay, next up is Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in their second film together, and still my favorite, well, one of my favorites anyway, The Gay Divorcee, which is they're dancing around in beautiful Art Deco splendor. Forget the story; it doesn't matter. It's all about mistaken identity. There's all kinds of comedy bits going on in this. Gives them a chance to dance to beautiful songs like Night and Day, Cole Porter. A long sequence called The Continental, which was it's kind of a dance craze, very popular song. Edward Everett Horton is in it. Betty Grable shows up. It's just a beautiful, fun movie, and they are so charming. Can't get enough of watching it. Next up is a Japanese horror film from 2001, I believe. It's called Pulse, and its original Japanese name is Cairo, and the director's name is I guess it became pretty prominent in horror films. Kiyoshi Kurosawa. This is a very strange little movie that is something that, again, needs to be seen several times to just keep getting more of what it's trying to show you. It's all about alienation in modern life, about isolation, even people who live in big cities, and about the nature of death and life after death. And some of the imagery is so incredibly creepy. It is just, it's almost hard to take. I mean, it's just beautiful. But I think it's a masterpiece, okay? Pulse. And finally, this is Citizen Kane, and I love this film very much, and I'm not putting this on here to make myself seem pretentious. I've always liked Citizen Kane. I've seen it many times, including a couple of times on the big screen. But I recently saw this in one of my film classes, and I found myself finally, after so many times of watching it before and just sort of standing apart from it and looking at it like, oh, this is a classic. I have to like this. I do. I appreciate what he's done. I appreciate the way it looks, but I'm not connecting with it emotionally. I wasn't connecting with the characters. Well, on my last watch, I finally did. I found myself really caring about Charles Foster Kane, about his mother, about everybody surrounding him, especially his second wife, played by Dorothy Cummingore, in an amazing performance. So yeah, I appreciate and love Citizen Kane much more than I ever did, so I'm very happy to put it on my list. And I've been keeping you busy for 22 minutes, and that's enough. Thank you for watching, and comments are welcome.